My greedy sister-in-law returned for her abandoned son's trust fund and walked right into my trap. 10 years after she abandoned her son, Jessica reappeared. She was not there for a reunion. She was there for his $1 million trust fund. What she did not know was that her sister-in-law, Sarah, was prepared for her return. Jessica was about to walk into a trap that had been in development for years. This is a story of greed and of a quiet plan designed to create justice. For a time, the lives of Sarah and her husband Mark were simple. They had built a life on mutual respect and shared dreams. They lived in a house with a garden and had fulfilling careers. It was a stable life. Jessica, Mark's younger sister, was the opposite of stable. She was known for a pattern of poor decisions, leaving a trail of consequences for others to manage. She chased get-rich-quick schemes, always ending up with nothing. When she announced she was pregnant at 22, the family was anxious. The father was not in the picture. The hope was that motherhood would provide an anchor for her. That hope was given the name Leo. From his birth, Leo was a bright presence. He was a beautiful baby with his mother's dark hair, but he had a calm disposition that was entirely his own. Mark and Sarah fell in love with him instantly, becoming his default babysitters and financial backstop. For them, time with Leo was a gift. For Jessica, it often seemed to be an obligation. She loved him in her own way, but she resented the responsibilities of being a single mother. Her parents, Mark and Jessica's, were pragmatic people who had built a successful business. They loved their daughter, but they did not trust her. To ensure their grandson's future, they set up a trust fund for Leo. The amount was substantial, $1 million, inaccessible until Leo's 21st birthday. The fund was to be managed by an estate lawyer, a man named Mr. Harrison, who took his fiduciary duties seriously. Jessica was furious. She viewed the trust not as a provision for her son, but as a judgment against her. She argued and pleaded, but her parents were resolute. The money was for Leo's future, not Jessica's present. 1 year after the trust was established, her parents were killed in a car accident. In the aftermath of their deaths, responsibility settled on Mark and Sarah's shoulders. For Jessica, the last authority figures in her life were gone. The year that followed was a downward spiral for Jessica. She spent the small inheritance her parents left her on bad investments and fleeting highs. Leo, now 5 years old, became an anchor she wanted to cut loose. Offers from Sarah and Mark to help were met with suspicion. She saw their concern as criticism. The day it happened was a Tuesday. Sarah was at work, a middle school teacher, when Mark called her. His voice was strained. He asked, "Have you heard from Jessica?" "No, not since the weekend. Why?" "She's not answering her phone," he said. "I went by her apartment. The landlord said she packed a bag and left early this morning. Sarah, she left Leo." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What do you mean she left Leo?" He said, "I heard him crying. He used the master key to get in. Leo was there, alone." Sarah left work. She and Mark rushed to the apartment. The scene was bleak. In the middle of the cluttered living room sat 5-year-old Leo, surrounded by toy cars. He was in his pajamas, his face puffy from crying. When he saw Mark, he began to cry again. Pinned to his collar was a hastily scrawled note on a folded piece of paper. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. The words read, "I can't do this anymore. He's better off without me. I'm sorry." That was the entirety of the message. She had not just left her son, she had surrendered him. The police were called and a missing person report was filed, but it was a formality. Jessica did not want to be found. Her phone was disconnected and her bank account was empty. She had vanished. The first few nights were difficult. Leo would wake up screaming for his mother. He would ask if he had done something bad to make her leave. Each question was painful. They explained to the 5-year-old that the fault was not his. They wrapped him in love and reassurance, promising they would never leave him. A fierce, protective love for the boy cemented itself in Sarah's soul. He was no longer just their nephew. He was their son. Sarah made a silent promise to protect him from the woman who had abandoned him. The legal process to become Leo's guardians was a formality. With a clear case of child abandonment, the court granted Mark and Sarah full legal and physical custody. For the next 10 years, Jessica was a ghost. Raising Leo was a challenging and rewarding journey. The first year was focused on rebuilding his sense of security. They established routines: Taco Tuesdays, Friday movie nights, Sunday morning pancakes. These small rituals became the bedrock of his new life. Mark taught him to ride a bike, to fish, and to fix things. He showed him what it meant to be a man through quiet consistency and presence. Slowly, the haunted look in his eyes faded. As he grew, his personality emerged. He was quiet and observant, with a sharp sense of humor. He developed a love of art from Sarah and a knack for mechanics from Mark. By 15, he could paint a landscape and strip down a dirt bike engine with equal skill. He was kind, responsible, and loyal to the two people who had chosen to be his family. They were honest with him about Jessica. They showed him pictures and explained, in age-appropriate terms, that his mother must have been very sad and confused to make such a choice. They never poisoned him against her. The facts were sufficient. The trust fund was always in the background. Mr. Harrison, the estate lawyer, sent quarterly statements, and the number grew. Sarah and Mark were careful. They taught Leo about budgeting and the value of work. He got a part-time job at a local bike shop. They wanted him to understand that trust was an opportunity, not a lottery ticket. They were determined to raise a man, not a trust fund baby. For 10 years, their life was a tapestry of school plays, scraped knees, and the quiet joy of watching a child become a young man. They believed the storm had passed for good. But sometimes storms only move out to sea to gather strength. It was a crisp autumn evening when the doorbell rang. Sarah opened the door to find Jessica standing on her doorstep. 10 years had been concealed by expensive creams and cosmetic procedures. She was chicly dressed in a tailored coat and leather boots. She looked polished and successful. She smiled a practiced smile. "Sarah, it's been a long time." Sarah was frozen. Mark and Leo came in from the garage, their laughter dying as they saw her. Leo's face went pale. He knew exactly who she was. "Jessica," Mark said, his voice flat, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to see my son," she replied, her gaze fixing on Leo. Her eyes welled with tears. "Oh, Leo, look at you. You're so grown up." She took a step forward, but Leo flinched. The rejection was clear. That first encounter set the tone. Jessica, who had married a wealthy real estate developer, began a campaign to reinsert herself into Leo's life. It started with texts he mostly ignored, then unsolicited gifts, a top-of-the-line gaming console, designer clothes, a flashy new bike. Leo saw them as bribes. She began showing up at his school and calling his workplace. She played the part of the repentant mother, telling a story of a young girl who had a mental breakdown and spent 10 years regretting her mistake. Some people believed her, but Sarah and Mark saw the calculation in her eyes. The true motive surfaced during a tense coffee meeting. "I've been looking into Leo's finances, the trust from Mom and Dad. It must be quite significant by now." "It's being managed by Mr. Harrison, just as your parents instructed," Sarah stated. "But he's 15 now," she pressed. "He'll need guidance, a mother's guidance. He shouldn't be living in this environment. He deserves the best. Private schools, trips to Europe, things I can give him now." The implication was clear. She was back for his money. She saw him as a winning lottery ticket she had misplaced. Sarah's initial shock hardened into resolve. She had spent 10 years building a fortress of love around Leo. She would not let the wolf talk her way through the gate. The declaration of war arrived by courier. It was a formal legal petition. Jessica was suing for full custody of Leo. The documents accused Sarah and Mark of emotional neglect and claimed their modest home was an unsuitable environment for a boy of his means. She was weaponizing their simple life against them. Mark was ready to fight back directly, but Sarah stopped him. "No, Mark," she said. "We're not going to get into a public mudslinging contest. That's what she wants. We're going to do this differently." A quiet part of Sarah's mind had been preparing for this day. She had a plan. The first step was to call Mr. Harrison, the estate lawyer. He had known her in-laws for 30 years and was disgusted by Jessica's actions. He agreed to work with their family lawyer. The second step was to hire a private investigator, a discreet and thorough woman named Carla. Sarah wanted to know the truth about Jessica's life over the past decade. She suspected the polished exterior hid debt. Carla obtained bank statements and a sworn statement from a former friend who confirmed Jessica had been talking for months about getting her rich son back to solve her financial problems. Sarah saved the recording. The final piece of the trap was the most delicate. Sarah reached out to a cousin, Emily, who had stayed in loose contact with Jessica. Sarah explained the situation and asked Emily to meet with Jessica and record their conversation.
Emily agreed. She met Jessica for lunch. Confident and feeling superior, Jessica laid out her entire plan. She bragged about how she would win custody and liberate Leo. Then came the damning words. "Honestly, the kid is almost grown," she said. "I'll send him to a good boarding school. He'll be fine. That trust fund can finally be put to good use, paying off some of my old debts and setting me up properly. It's the least he can do for me after all I've sacrificed." When Emily sent the recording, Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. The day of the custody hearing was gray and overcast. Jessica sat at the opposing table, dressed in a conservative navy blue suit, her expression a mask of sorrowful determination. Her lawyer opened with a passionate monologue, painting Jessica as a victim of profound postpartum depression who had made a regrettable mistake. He contrasted her newfound wealth with Sarah and Mark's limited working-class means. Then Jessica took the stand. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her love for her baby boy. She cried real tears as she recounted a fabricated story of her breakdown. She looked at the judge and whispered, "I just want my son back. I know I made a mistake. Every day for 10 years I have dreamt of this moment." The judge seemed sympathetic. Sarah's heart pounded. Mark squeezed her hand. Then it was their lawyer's turn. Mr. Davies was quiet and methodical. He approached the stand. "Mrs. Thorne, you claim your only motivation here is a mother's love." "Yes, of course," Jessica said. "Is it true that you recently told your cousin, Emily Carter, that you intended to send Leo to boarding school as soon as you gained custody?" Jessica's face tightened. We discussed options. "And is it true you told her, and I quote, that trust fund can finally be put to good use, paying off some of my old debts and setting me up properly?" Jessica's face drained from the color. "No, that's a lie." "Perhaps." Mr. Davies said, "Your Honor, we would like to play a recording of a conversation between Mrs. Thorne and Miss Emily Carter." Jessica's lawyer objected, but the recording was legal. The judge, his expression now wary, allowed it. Jessica's smug, dismissive voice filled the silent courtroom, talking about boarding schools and old debts. The mask shattered. Mr. Davies was not finished. "Mrs. Thorne, you've testified that you are now financially stable." "Yes," she whispered. "Is it not true that you currently have outstanding secret debts totaling more than $200,000, largely due to a gambling problem you've hidden from your husband?" He produced the PI's report, bank statements, loan agreements. He laid them out, piece by piece. The final testimony came from Leo. He walked to the stand with quiet confidence. He spoke about his life with Sarah and Mark, about learning to ride a bike, about the night Sarah sat with him until his nightmares went away. He spoke of a home filled with love. Then he turned his gaze to Jessica. "You didn't have a breakdown," he said, his voice clear and steady. "You left a note. You said I was better off without you. And for a long time, I believed something was wrong with me. But now I know you were right. I am better off without you. My life is with Sarah and Mark. They are my parents. They didn't have to be, but they chose to be. You are my mother, but you chose not to be." He looked back at the judge. "I want to stay with my family, Your Honor." It was over. Her lies and her entire fabricated reality lay in ruins. The judge's ruling was swift. He denied her petition, citing her staggering display of deceit and callous and mercenary motives. He called her actions, both 10 years ago and in his courtroom, morally reprehensible. He denied her petition with prejudice, meaning she could never file again. He issued a permanent restraining order. Then, he announced he was referring the entire case file to the district attorney's office with a recommendation for investigation into perjury, fraud, and felony child abandonment. Jessica sat catatonic. Her wealthy husband, who had been sitting behind her, looking increasingly horrified, stood up, turned his back on her, and walked out of the courtroom. Her world had collapsed. As she was led out, her eyes met Sarah's. They held no remorse, only a venomous rage. Sarah felt nothing but relief. The ghost that had haunted them was gone. They walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight. Leo walked between Mark and Sarah and took both of their hands. The storm was finally over. In the months that followed, life settled into a new, more peaceful normal. The threat of Jessica was gone. Word got back to them that her husband had filed for divorce the day after the hearing. The DA's office pressed charges, leaving her to face a significant legal battle. For Leo, the change was profound. The final chapter of a painful book was closed. He poured himself into his art and mechanics. He and Mark started restoring a vintage motorcycle. One evening, a few months after the trial, Leo approached Sarah with a statement for the trust fund. He said, "I've been thinking about this. I don't want to wait until I'm 21 to have a plan." They sat at the kitchen table. He had researched design and engineering schools. He had ideas for starting his own custom bike shop. The $1 million was no longer a target on his back. It was the foundation for his dreams. In that moment, Sarah knew they had succeeded. They had protected not just the boy, but his future. The trap set for Jessica was not an act of revenge. It was an act of protection born of love. It was the only way to ensure the past could not hurt Leo's future. True wealth is not measured in dollars, a lesson Jessica never learned. It's measured in quiet evenings, shared laughter, and the loyalty of a family that chooses to be one. They had something more valuable than a trust fund. They had each other.